Hello, there's some breaking news. Yesterday, the House passed legislation to block Biden's forgiveness, as well as reinstate interest payments in September of 2022 for borrowers, since this whole time we've been receiving 0% interest. So I'm going to give a whole breakdown of what happened yesterday. This legislation really makes me personally angry. It makes me angry because it's rescinding the promises that the administration and the government has already basically made to borrowers. And so if you like this content or updates around student loans, around other financial wellness and personal finance topics, please subscribe to this channel. In the meantime, I'm going to give you the full rundown of what happened. There's a lot of news articles and a lot of news outlets that are releasing the news, and I basically read through all of them, as well as some more official government documents as well, so I can give full information right here on this channel. So first and foremost, this legislation has passed the House. It has not passed the Senate yet, and it passed the House by 218 votes. Supporting the resolution and 203 votes not supporting the resolution. So it's 218 to 203, with 2 Democrats supporting the resolution. And these Democrats were Representative Jared Golden of Maine and Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez of Washington State, and which is shocking because at least from the Democratic promise of this administration has been attempting to support loan forgiveness, right? So essentially it's gone through the House. So what the next steps are is that it has to pass the Senate with a simple majority. The president has already said if it goes to him after that, he will veto it, which means the legislation will have to come back and it will have to be supported by a 2/3 majority this time in order to get passed. But essentially, on Monday, the White House promised to veto the resolution if Congress approves it. And essentially what the resolution has stated is that even if the Supreme Court supports any form of loan forgiveness, this legislation is basically saying we do not support the 10 to 20,000 of forgiveness. So it's setting up a measure that says legally, legislatively, we do not support it if it were to get passed. In addition, I'm going to talk about the interest payments and what the impact is. So there's tons of borrowers. When I mean tons, I mean over 400,000 borrowers that got their loans forgiven through the extended waiver for public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment waiver as well. And in this time, we've been getting $0 payments. This legislation is basically saying all the interest from September of 2022 to present would be reinstated. So that means people who have literally got their loans forgiven already would now have interest payments and balance that they have to pay on interest still. So it would literally be like saying, hey, your loans are forgiven, you have no more payments, you don't have to pay anymore, and now you're getting a bill with X hundreds to thousands of interest that accumulated between September of 2022 till the time you got your loans forgiven. Here you go, pay this interest. And it's basically reinstating payments for borrowers who already got their loans forgiven, which that's why this legislation makes me annoyed, makes me a little angry, because it's one thing to say, hey, as a congressional body, we don't support loan forgiveness. That's fine because that has not been given yet. But to say, hey, you owe interest on a debt that's already supposedly you got in a statement that says your balance is 0 now, that to me seems wrong because you're taking back what was already given to people. That to me is wrong. If Congress were really against it, they could have passed this before. You know, it would be one thing if they passed it and said, oh, any interest that accumulates after this time, after the legislation passed, will be owed, but not to go back in time and say the interest is now owed on debt that was forgiven. I think that is totally wrong. That should be illegal. And in fact, I would be very surprised if there weren't well, not just individuals, but think tanks or forgiveness body. I'm sorry, like the think tanks, the National like Consumer Law Center, and other various civic rights groups don't sue and say this is actually illegal because this is what was promised to borrowers as part of this legislation, for Congress to go back and say, no, like this is illegal. You can't claw back funds from people, right? So I don't know. Like, I don't know I'm not an attorney, so I don't know all the legality, but I have a feeling some other lawsuits are going to be down the pike if this actually passed. I do not think that this will be supported by 2/3 of the congressional body, though. And that's what needs to happen to overcome, to actually get passed, right? So the measure would retroactively add several months of student loan interest that was waived by Biden's extensions and by Biden's waivers, like I said, according to a letter from more than 260 organizations urging Congress to reject it. So many people are saying reject this. That's not right for these hundreds of thousands of borrowers, right? Passing it would immediately force tens of millions of borrowers into abrupt and unplanned repayment with devastating effects, the coalition said. The action would end public service loan forgiveness, a student loan cancellation program for teachers, firefighters, or other public workers, which, that would be devastating. That's another huge impact. So it'd claw back interest. Also, it's stating that it's going to end, which public service, I don't think there's as big of a threat to that, because that has been legislated and passed to support. Now they're saying we want to get rid of all types of loan forgiveness programs, which I don't think is. I think there might be a fight in Congress of supporting specific measures, but I don't actually think Congress is going to, because public service loan forgiveness has never been politically contentious until now, because there's congressional members that don't understand the difference between blanket forgiveness of 10 to 20,000 versus people who've actually served in a public service capacity and making payments for 120 payments. There's a difference, right? Blanket forgiveness versus actually proving that you served time and made payments. That's very different. But a lot of congressional members don't understand the difference, and they're just signing legislation in support of like treating all loan forgiveness equally. And it's not equal, right? It's not. There are programs that have historically been supported by Republicans, like public service loan forgiveness. It was never politically contentious when it was passed the first time. So that to me is also very infuriating. I feel like the politics have turned very bipartisan, and it's like Republicans automatically support this bill because they're like, oh, well, we don't support loan forgiveness. But loan forgiveness of a blanket forgiveness of 20,000, again, is different than someone who worked for 120 months and made payments, right? So that to me was a very shocking part of the legislation. About 43% of U.S. adults approve of how Biden is handling the student debt, according to recent poll with Associated Press Center of Public Affairs Research. That's similar to his overall approval rating, which is about 40%. So that's interesting, only 43%, which I believe is low, but because I think he's attempting to do what he promised, right? But better his ratings on the economy, gun policy, and immigration. Biden gets credit for the issues among young adults in particular, where 53% of those under 30 approving how he's handling student loans. Obviously, young people agree more, and the problem with our legislative bodies are the average age is over 60 years old. So, of course, their opinion lines up with older Americans rather than younger Americans. And this is why we need younger people to serve in government, okay? Republicans say Biden overstepped his authority. This is what the legislation is saying. Well, Republicans say Biden overstepped his authority and illegally sidestepped Congress to pursue loan cancellation, which was a key campaign promise. Opponents say it's too expensive and unfair benefit college graduates receive at the expense of taxpayers who didn't go to college, which is untrue. 4 out of 10 people that borrow loans for school don't even graduate. So they're not even college graduates, right? And they're kind of pitting educated versus uneducated, which is simply untrue. Democrats, and by the way, loan cancellation of the 10 to 20, 90% of it was going to people earning $75,000 or less. So it's not even like it's giving money. They make it seem like you're giving money to all these rich people, which the majority of the forgiveness was not going to rich people. So that's also an untrue statement. A lot of the things that come out in the media are just simply untrue based on the actual exhaustive research the Department of Ed did to target the forgiveness programs to those earning under a specific amount of money. So, but there's no nuance in that. What the media comes out with, what people believe, they don't have a nuanced understanding. They just say, we don't support giving college-educated people break versus non-college-educated people. It's like just these overall blanket statements that are simply untrue again. Democrats say Biden's plan gives much-needed relief to Americans hit hardest in the pandemic. They argue that federal law gives the Education Department wide authority to cancel student loans. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that Biden's one-time cancellation would cost $315 billion. Again, how much are we sending to Ukraine, right? And when we send more money to Ukraine, nobody questions it. But when we're going to give relief to Americans, now it's under question. And now it's like, oh, well, non-educated people are going to pay for the loan forgiveness of educated people. And it's not like dollar for dollar. I got an education, you give me debt relief, and you're going to my neighbor who doesn't have a college education asking him to pay for me. That's not how it works. There's all kinds of programs the government supports that comes out of a general fund. And at the same time, Republicans don't want to support any type of getting rid of tax loops that are serving literally people that earn over, $250 million a year. I mean, there's tax loops that really help the ultra wealthy, not even like people earning $500,000 a year. It's literally tax loops that help people earning like over $250 million a year. Those tax loops Republicans refuse to get rid of to raise more money for the government, to support more programs for Americans. They refuse to do that in this new fight for the debt ceiling increase, yet they're willing to nitpick on the dollars and cents. And I don't want to call it pennies, but they're really dollars and cents compared to what we're spending on our military, what we're spending on Ukraine, the amount of tax loopholes for ultra wealthy. It just does not add up that we're making a political fight for something that benefits Americans versus like everyday Americans, right? These are everyday Americans. Even if you have a college degree, you're an everyday American. You're not someone earning over an ultra wealthy individual and I hate to pit rich against poor. I don't want to make it seem that way, but there's a lot of things that are not adding up with all these arguments, in my opinion. So Republicans have escalated their war on Biden's student loan agenda in the recent weeks, and they've been trying to pass this through legislation for some months now because there's been news on getting together committees in order to pass this. Last month, the House passed a U.S. debt legislation that would reverse Biden's cancellation, ending the repayment pause and barred the Department of Ed from future debt forgiveness. So that's what they're doing. They're not just trying to stop it for now, but they're trying to stop any of the Department of Education's ability to give any form of debt forgiveness in the future. And the bill would end, which has been seen as dead on arrival in Senate, also aimed to eliminate a new and more generous loan forgiveness plan being pushed by Biden, which is the $10,000 to $20,000 I've been telling you about. Neither party wield a powerful majority in Congress. The Supreme Court would end up with the final say on this debate. The justices have been examining Biden's plan in response to a challenge of 6 Republican-led states, so we already know that. So the Supreme Court is seeing this. I'm very anxious. I say anxious because how this legislation makes me feel. I'm anxious to see how legislation ends up panning out in response to, as well as in response to the Supreme Court. This more than ever gives pressure on the Supreme Court to rule and gives even more credence and pressure to how the Supreme Court is ruling, I think. And we'll see how this plays out. I will keep you updated. I've given you kind of my full out opinion on this. And thank you for listening. Comment below. Do you agree? What is your opinion? What would you like to know more about as time goes on to see how this legislation moves forward? And yeah, what questions do you have? Happy to answer them. Have a great day.